Chapter 23. Paul cannot find the rock people. Life was very pleasant in Avonlea that summer, although Anne, amid all her vacation joys, was haunted by a sense of something gone which should be there. She would not admit, even in her inmost reflections, that this was caused by Gilbert's absence. But when she had to walk home alone from prayer meetings and AVIS powwows, while Diana and Fred and many other gay couples loitered along the dusky starlit country roads, there was a queer lonely ache in her heart which she could not explain away. Gilbert did not even write to her, as she thought he might have done. She knew he wrote to Diana occasionally, but she would not inquire about him, and Diana, supposing that Anne heard from him, volunteered no information. Gilbert's mother, who was a gay, frank, light-hearted lady, but not overburdened with tact, had a very embarrassing habit of asking Anne, always in a painfully distinct voice and always in the presence of a crowd, if she had heard from Gilbert lately. Poor Anne could only blush horribly and murmur, "Not very lately," which was taken by all, Mrs. Blythe included, to be merely a maidenly evasion. Apart from this, Anne enjoyed her summer. Priscilla came for a merry visit in June, and when she had gone, Mr. and Mrs. Irving, Paul, and Charlotta the Fourth came home for July and August. Echo Lodge was the scene of gaieties once more, and the echoes of the river were kept busy mimicking the laughter that rang in the old garden behind the spruces. Miss Lavendar had not changed, except to grow even sweeter and prettier. Paul adored her, and the companionship between them was beautiful to see. "But I don't call her mother just by itself," he explained to Anne. "You see, that name belongs just to my own little mother, and I can't give it to anyone else, you know, teacher. But I call her Mother Lavendar, and I love her next best to father. I even love her a little better than you, teacher." "Which is just as it ought to be," answered Anne. Paul was 13 now, and very tall for his years. His face and eyes were as beautiful as ever, and his fancy was still like a prism, separating everything that fell upon it into rainbows. He and Anne had delightful rambles to wood and field and shore. Never were there two more thoroughly kindred spirits. Charlotta the Fourth had blossomed out into young ladyhood. She wore her hair now in an enormous pompadour, and had discarded the blue ribbon bows of old Lang Syne, but her face was as freckled, her nose as snubbed, and her mouth and smiles as wide as ever. "You don't think I talk with a Yankee accent, do you, Miss Shirley, ma'am?" she demanded anxiously. "I'm real glad of that. They said I did at home, but I thought likely they just want to aggravate me. I don't want no Yankee accent, not that I've a word to say against the Yankees, Miss Shirley, ma'am. They're real civilized, but give me old P.E. Island every time." Paul spent his first fortnight with his grandmother Irving in Avonlea. Anne was there to meet him when he came, and found him wild with eagerness to get to the shore. Nora and Golden Lady and the twin sailors would be there. He could hardly wait to eat his supper. Could he not see Nora's elfin face peering around the point, watching for him wistfully? But it was a very sober Paul who came back from the shore in the twilight. "Didn't you find your rock people?" asked Anne. Paul shook his chestnut curls sorrowfully. "The twin sailors and the Golden Lady never came at all," he said. "Nora was there, but Nora is not the same, teacher. She is changed." "Oh, Paul, it is you who are changed," said Anne. "You have grown too old for the rock people. They like only children for playfellows. I'm afraid the twin sailors will never again come to you in the pearly enchanted boat with the sail of moonshine, and the golden lady will play no more for you on her golden harp. Even Nora will not meet you much longer. You must pay the penalty of growing up, Paul. You must leave fairyland behind you.
You two talk as much foolishness as ever you did, said old Mrs. Irving, half indulgently, half reprovingly.
Oh, no, we don't, said Anne, shaking her head gravely. We are getting very, very wise, and it is such a pity. We are never half so interesting when we have learned that language is given us to enable us to conceal our thoughts.
But it isn't. It is given us to exchange our thoughts, said Mrs. Irving seriously. She had never heard of Talleyrand and did not understand epigrams. Anne spent a fortnight of halcyon days at Echo Lodge in the golden prime of August. While there, she incidentally contrived to hurry Ludovic Speed in his leisurely courting of Theodora Dix, as related Julie in another chronicle of her history, Chronicles of Avonlea. Arnold Sherman, an elderly friend of the Irvings, was there at the same time and added not a little to the general pleasantness of life.
What a nice playtime this has been, said Anne. I feel like a giant refreshed, and it's only a fortnight more till I go back to Kingsport and Redmond and Patty's Place. Patty's Place is the dearest spot, Miss Lavender. I feel as if I had two homes, one at Green Gables and one at Patty's Place. But where has the summer gone? It doesn't seem a day since I came home that spring evening with the Mayflowers. When I was little, I couldn't see from one end of the summer to the other. It stretched before me like an unending season. Now 'tis a handbreadth, 'tis a tale.
Anne, are you and Gilbert Blythe as good friends as you used to be? Asked Miss Lavender quietly.
I'm just as much Gilbert's friend as ever I was Miss Lavender.
Miss Lavender shook her head. I see something's gone wrong, Anne. I'm going to be pertinent and ask what. Have you quarreled?
No, it's only that Gilbert wants more than friendship, and I can't give him more.
Are you sure of that, Anne?
Perfectly sure.
I'm very, very sorry.
I wonder why everybody seems to think I ought to marry Gilbert Blythe, said Anne petulantly.
Because you were made and meant for each other, Anne, that is why. You needn't toss that young head of yours, it's a fact. Chapter 24. Enter Jonas. Prospect Point, August 20th. Dear Anne, spelled with an E, wrote Phil. I must prop my eyelids open long enough to write you. I've neglected you shamefully this summer, honey, but all my other correspondence have been neglected too. I have a huge pile of letters to answer, so I must grit up the loins of my mind and hoe in. Excuse my mixed metaphors. I'm fearfully sleepy. Last night, Cousin Emily and I were calling at a neighbor's. There were several other callers there, and as soon as those unfortunate creatures left, our hostess and her 3 daughters picked them all to pieces. I knew they would begin on Cousin Emily and me as soon as the door shut behind us. When we came home, Mrs. Lilly informed us that the aforesaid neighbor's hired boy was supposed to be down with scarlet fever. You can always trust Mrs. Lilly to tell you cheerful things like that. I have a horror of scarlet fever. I couldn't sleep when I went to bed thinking of it. I tossed and tumbled about, dreaming fearful dreams when I did snooze for a minute, and at 3 I wakened up with a high fever, a sore throat, and a raging headache. I knew I had scarlet fever. I got up in a panic and hunted up Cousin Emily's doctor book to read up the symptoms, and I had them all, so I went back to bed, and knowing the worst, slept like a top the rest of the night. Though why a top should sleep sounder than anything else I never could understand, but this morning I was quite well, so it couldn't have been the fever. I suppose if I did catch it last night, it couldn't have been developed so soon. I can remember that in daytime. I can remember that in daytime, but at 3 o'clock at night, it never can be logical. I suppose you wonder what I'm doing at Prospect Point. Well, I always like to spend a month of summer at the shore, and father insists that I come to his second cousin Emily's select boarding house at Prospect Point. So a fortnight ago, I came as usual, and as usual, old Uncle Mark Miller brought me from the station with his ancient buggy and what he calls his generous purpose horse. He is a nice old man, and he gave me a handful of pink peppermints. Peppermints always seemed to me such religious sort of candy, I suppose, because when I was a little girl, Grandmother Gordon always gave them to me in church. Once I asked, referring to the smell of peppermints, "Is that the odor of sanctity?" I don't like to eat Uncle Mark's peppermints because he just fished him loose out of his pocket and had to pick some rusty nails and other things from among them before he gave them to me. But I wouldn't hurt his dear old feelings for anything, so I carefully sowed them along the road at intervals. When the last one was gone, when the last one was gone, Uncle Mark said, a little rebukingly, "Ye shouldn't eat all of them candies on, Miss Phil. You'll likely have the stomach ache." Cousin Emily has only 5 boarders beside myself, 4 old ladies and 1 young man. My right my right hand neighbor is Mrs. Lilly. She is one of those people who seem to take a gruesome She is one of those people who seem to take a gruesome pleasure in detailing all their many aches and pains and sicknesses. "You cannot mention any ailment but," she says, shaking her head. "Ah, I know too well what that is." And then you get all the details. Jonas declares he once spoke of locomotor ataxia in hearing, and she said she knew too well what that was. She suffered from it for 10 years and was finally cured by a traveling doctor. Who is Jonas? Just wait, Anne Shirley. You'll hear all about Jonas in a proper time and place. He is not to be mixed up with estimable old ladies. My left-hand neighbor at the table is Mrs. Finney. She always speaks of a wailing, dolorous voice. You're nervously expecting her to burst into tears at every moment. She gives you the impression that life to her is indeed a vale of tears, and that a smile, never to speak of a laugh, is a frivolity truly reprehensible. She has a worse opinion of me than Aunt Jamesina, and she doesn't love me hard to atone for it as Auntie J does either. Miss Maria Grimsey sits catty corner from me. The first day I came, I remarked to Miss Maria that it looked like a little like rain, and Miss Maria laughed. I said the road from the station was very pretty, and Miss Maria laughed. I said there seemed to be a few mosquitoes left yet, and Miss Maria laughed. I said that Prospect Point was as beautiful as ever, and Miss Maria laughed. If I were to say to Miss Maria, "My father has hanged himself, my mother has taken poison, my brother is in the penitentiary, and I am in the last stages of consumption," Miss Maria would laugh. She can't help it, she was born so, but it is very sad and awful. The 5th old lady is Mrs. Grant. She is a sweet old thing. She is a sweet old thing, but she never says anything but good of anybody, and so she is a very uninteresting conversationalist. And now for Jonas, Anne. The first day I came, I saw a young man sitting opposite me at a table, smiling at me as if he had known me from my cradle. I knew for Uncle Mark had told me that his name was Jonas Blake, that he was a theological student from St. Columbia, and that he had taken charge of the Point Prospect Mission Church for the summer. He is a very ugly young man, really the ugliest young man I've ever seen. He has a big, loose, jointed figure with absurdly long legs. His hair is tow color and lank. His eyes are green, and his mouth is big, and his ears, but I never think about his ears if I can help it. He has a lovely voice. If you shut your eyes, he's adorable, and he certainly has a beautiful soul and disposition. We were good chums right away. Of course, he is a graduate of Redmond, and that is a link between us. We fished and boated together, and we walked on the sands by moonlight. He didn't look so homely by moonlight, and oh, he was nice. Niceness fairly exhaled from him. The old ladies, except Mrs. Grant, don't approve of Jonas because he laughs and jokes, and because he evidently likes the society of frivolous me better than theirs. Somehow, Anne, I don't want him to think me frivolous. This is ridiculous. Why should I care what a towhead person called Jonas, whom I never saw before, thinks of me? Last Sunday, Jonas preached in the village church. I went, of course, but I couldn't realize that Jonas was going to preach. The fact that he was a minister, or going to be one, persisted in seeming a huge joke to me. Well, Jonas preached, and by the time he had preached 10 minutes, I felt so small and insignificant that I thought I must be invisible to the naked eye. Jonas never said a word about women, and he never looked at me. But I realized then and there what a pitiful, frivolous, small-souled little butterfly I was, and how horribly different I must be from Jonas's ideal woman. She would be grand and strong and noble. He was so earnest and tender and true. He was everything a minister ought to be. I wondered how I could ever have thought him ugly, but he really is, with those inspired eyes and that intellectual brow which roughly falling hair hid on weekdays. It was a splendid sermon, and I could have listened to it forever, and it made me feel utterly wretched. Oh, I wish I was like you, Anne. He caught me with me. He caught up with me on the road home and grinned as cheerfully as usual, but his grin could never deceive me again. I had seen the real Jonas. I wondered if he could ever see the real Phil, whom nobody, not even you, Anne, has ever seen yet. Jonas, I said I forgot to call him Mr. Blake. Wasn't it dreadful? But there are times when things like that don't matter. Jonas, you were born to be a minister. You couldn't be anything else. Oh, his voice was low and reverent. I thought he would do his work and do it well and nobly, and happy the woman fitted by nature and training to help him do it. She would be no feather blown about by every fickle wind of fancy. She would always know what hat to put on. Probably she would have only one. Ministers never have much money, but she wouldn't mind having one hat or none at all, because she would have Jonas. And Shirley, don't you dare to say or hint or think that I've fallen in love with Mr. Blake. Could I care for a lank, poor, ugly theologue named Jonas? As Uncle Mark says, it's impossible, and what's more, it's improbable. Good night, Phil. P.S. It is impossible, but I am horribly afraid it's true. I'm happy and wretched and scared. He could never care for me, I know. Do you think I could ever develop into a passable minister's wife, Anne? And would they expect me to lead in prayer? PG.